let's talk champagne. I love champagne. Did you know that if the grapes are not grown in the Champagne region of France and processed by the Méthode Champenoise, it cannot be called champagne? 'Tis true. Everything else is just sparkling wine. Prosecco is a whole different thing, but we're not really here for a full lesson in winemaking. We are here to dispel a long-held misconception about who invented a very important part of the Méthode Champenoise called riddling, and to once again celebrate innovative women. This time, women in the wine industry. Welcome back to HerStance. I'm your host, Sandra Cayley. Just a few years ago, I traveled to Europe and took a day trip through Reims, France, part of the Champagne region. Wouldn't you know it, there I learned all about this important process called Méthode Champenoise and how a Benedictine monk, Dom Perignon, invented it. I even had my picture taken at his statue at the Moet et Chandon Champagne House. I couldn't afford anything else there. The history of how champagne came to be, like many innovations, is filled with happy accidents, competition, changing tastes, no pun intended, and even savvy marketing. Here's some history of women in the industry, if you will, of winemaking that will sound very familiar if you've been listening to my podcast for a while. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, women, particularly in European monasteries, had more pronounced roles in winemaking. Nuns in these religious communities were responsible for producing wine for both religious ceremonies and daily consumption. Their expertise was crucial in maintaining the vineyards and ensuring the quality of the wine. This period marks one of the first instances where women's contributions to winemaking were recognized, albeit within the confines of religious institutions. I bet you can see what's coming next: the Industrial Revolution. Where did the women go? Technological advancements and scientific approaches to viticulture, which is the study of grapes, and enology, the science of winemaking, pushed women back into the household kitchen. And it wasn't until the late 20th century that women began to break the glass ceiling in earnest, moving into roles that were previously inaccessible to them. Well, let me introduce you to a pioneering woman, Barbe-Nicole Clicquot Ponsardin, the Grande Dame of Champagne, who showed the world that not only could women make wine, but they could also lead successful businesses and produce award-winning vintages. Barbe-Nicole Ponsardin was born in the Napoleonic-ruled France in 1777 to wealthy parents. Her father was a textile manufacturer and politician. Philippe Clicquot was also a successful textile manufacturer and owned vineyards in the Champagne region with a young wine business. In an effort to consolidate the power of their two businesses, the two fathers arranged a marriage between Barbe-Nicole and Francois Clicquot. She was 21 at the time, Francois 27. Well, Philippe retired and left Francois to run the businesses. Tragically, just 6 years into the marriage, Francois died rather quickly of typhus, leaving Barbe-Nicole a widow and a mother of a 6-year-old daughter, Clementine. Philippe wanted to liquidate the businesses. However, the widow Clicquot made a proposal to her father-in-law to run the business and make the wine on her own. Now, the new Napoleonic Code restricted women from owning or engaging in business, except if you were a widow. A fortunate loophole. Philippe agreed as long as she undertook an apprenticeship to prove that she could run the business successfully, which of course she did. She became the first woman to take over a champagne house and the first woman champagne producer. And there were other firsts. She is credited with creating the first known vintage champagne in 1810. Now, a vintage is when a harvest is exceptional. The wine is made from and labeled as the products of a single vintage rather than a blend of grapes from multiple years' harvests. This means that the champagne will be very good and it has to mature on its side for at least 3 years before being released for sale. Also, very important to today's champagne, she invented the riddling table process to clarify champagne in 1816. So let me clarify. Prior to this invention of riddling, the second fermentation of wine to create champagne resulted in a very sweet wine with large bubbles and sediment from the remains of the yeast used in the fermentation in the bottle. That's what creates the bubbles, you see. The yeast eats the sugar, dies off, and then results in a cloudy wine. Well, she still used the original English technique of adding sugar, but after the second fermentation was complete, the bottles were held upside down in this table, and then the bottles were regularly turned ever so slightly so that the dead yeast would all gather near the cork, the riddling, and once settling was complete, the wine near the cork was removed, followed by an addition of wine to refill the bottle. The champagne was now clear and sparkling. And finally, in 1818, she invented the first known blended rosé champagne by blending still red and white wines, a process that is still used by the majority of champagne producers. Owing to her achievements as a businesswoman and her invention of 3 new techniques for making champagne, she became known as the Grande Dame of Champagne. Now, the French Empire was embroiled in the Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815. Distribution of champagne was not without difficulties. Her sales rep and friend, Louise Bon, also had been a faithful employee of the company since it was owned by her father-in-law, circumvented Napoleonic challenges by finding a thirsty clientele within the royal family in St. Petersburg, Russia, which greatly elevated the esteem of what was now named Veuve Clicquot, the widow Clicquot. In this way, her business was able to weather these difficult times and actually become a luxury item. Madame Clicquot is considered one of the world's first international businesswomen. She was the first to take over management of a company and guide it through hazardous times. She brought her wine business back from the brink of destruction, turning it into one of the most successful champagne houses. She also spread champagne across the globe. When she died at age 89, sales had reached 750,000 bottles a year. Veuve Clicquot was exporting champagne from France to all Europe, the United States, Asia, and elsewhere. Veuve Clicquot had become both a substantial champagne house and a respected brand. Easily recognized by its distinctive bright yellow labels, the wine held a royal warrant from Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom. Now, to be fair, Madame Clicquot was not the only widow of Champagne. In fact, the idea of the widow became a marketing trademark of the region. Lily Boulanger, who ran the Boulanger House for several decades, is known for her famous quote, "I drink champagne when I'm happy and when I'm sad. Sometimes I drink it when I'm alone. And when I have company, I consider it obligatory. I trifle with it if I'm not hungry and drink it when I am. Otherwise, I never touch it unless I'm thirsty." Louise Palmery, also a widow, was relentless in her pursuit of quality and can be credited with producing the very first brut champagne. That's very dry, not sweet. Well, happily, today a woman doesn't have to be a widow to own and run a business. However, the wine industry is not flooded with women owners, winemakers, sommeliers, no matter that women are quickly becoming the larger segment of wine consumers, more likely to purchase wine club memberships, and more likely to purchase premium wines. As of 2023, roughly 18% of the 5,000 wineries in California alone are women-owned, only 1% of which, however, are Black-owned. And in terms of viticulturalists, those folks who study grapes, only 14.3% are women. And 78% of all the viticulturalists are white. In the field of enology, those are the folks who work in the area of winemaking, the science of wine. That can be anything from when the harvest is ready, what is going to make the best wine, the style, even overseeing bottling. Well, it's improving. 49.2% of enologists are women. However, 72% of all enologists are white. Now, what about sommeliers? A sommelier is a wine professional who selects, pairs, serves, and educates guests about wine. Master sommeliers are among the most respected and influential wine professionals in the world. As of January 2024, there were only 269 master sommeliers worldwide, with 149 in the Americas. Out of these, only 28 are women. The majority are white. Studies have shown that women are less likely to be hired for sommelier positions and are often paid less than men. Now, do people generally not want to take advice from women? Do they think that women don't have great palates? Or is it just the snobbery of it all? Maybe we just don't buy into all of that. Well, here's what I'm learning about the women who are in the industry today. They are innovative. Many of today's women winemakers are pushing the boundaries of what a wine can be. What have they got to lose anyway, right? They take risks. They experiment with new methods or make it their mission to save indigenous grape varieties. The McBride sisters from New Zealand developed the She Can, wine in cans, to be more portable, and they tied it to a professional development grant program to lift others up in the industry. Speaking of mentorship and collaboration, women share ideas and women value sustainability. Sustainable practices in the vineyard could look like water conservation and integrating crops and livestock to promote biodiversity. And during the winemaking process, they avoid additives like yeasts or sulfites to create expressive natural wines. There's no stuffiness about these women. Pick up one of my favorite books, Wine for Normal People, by certified wine specialist and sommelier Elizabeth Schneider. take a wine class over Zoom, or book a vacation with her to Tuscany. Look, grapes come from the earth. Call it terroir or dirt, terrain, and climate. Let's come down from the stratosphere about this stuff. These women are inspired, they're super knowledgeable, and they're approachable. The future of wine is female. So that brings us to the HerStance challenge. I ask you, what inspires you? What have you always thought about doing, but thought it wasn't approachable or accessible? Maybe right now you're living someone else's values, their dreams for you, or you are living someone else's version of yourself. Do you doubt that you have in you what those other women have that get them what you want? Well, I'll break the news to you. There is nothing missing in you. You have everything that you see in the people around you. You just need to identify and then own what you most admire most in others, 100%, to the same degree as you see it in them. When you value your unique genius, the world values you too. I challenge you to get started on that right away. Think about who you really admire and who does the thing that you really want to be doing. Start small. Pick one area of your life. It could be spiritual, mental, family, social, physical, you name it. And once you narrow it down to someone that you can research, someone you know or someone that has information out there, list what traits or actions they took, or even importantly, what they didn't or don't do that makes them great or a success at doing the thing that you want to do. And then start listing out your own traits, actions, or inactions that you do to the same degree, 100%, that you possess that matches that person. What's going to happen? You're going to realize that, just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. Now go out there, stand in your power, and be amazing. Thanks again for tuning in to HerStance today. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a comment. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for being here again. And if you have a woman who inspires you and you'd like to learn more, put that woman's name in the comments. I'd love to bring her onto a future episode. And then jump over to my product store at theleap.co/creator/HerStance. There you can also sign up for my newsletter that offers great ways to be engaged in today's women's rights movement. I'm looking forward to being with you again on HerStance.